I'm Jill Liskey. I'm the Administrator for Service Coordination. So welcome to our DD Division and Agency Provider meeting. We're excited to have everybody join us today. We have a lot of people on, so that's great. Just wanted to let folks know we are going to be recording this webinar. So then that way those folks who are not able to make the meeting would be able to watch the recording that will be posted on our public website following the meeting. It might take a day or so to get it on there, but it will eventually be on there with the PowerPoint as well. All right, we do have a pretty full agenda today. As you can see, we're covering just quite a few things that involve a lot of different folks. So we have a variety of presenters from the division as well. A few housekeeping things. We will go ahead and keep everybody on mute during the call. You are certainly welcome to unmute if you have a question or if you have a comment. And you can also use the chat bar on the side as well to put any questions or comments in there. All right. I think we'll go ahead and get started. And I think Joni Gebhardt, you are up first.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Joni Gebhardt. I'm the OAP manager for Developmental Disabilities Division. And I'm just popping on for a couple minutes here to remind you that we are doing some ICAP training for providers. Our first session will be next week, April 21st, from 10 a.m. until noon. Our second session will be offered June 16th from 10 a.m. till noon. They will be the same session. The training will be the same, so you're not having to come to both unless you desire to attend both of them. And WebEx invitations have been sent out to all of the agency providers on our mailing list. So just hoping to see you there next week. Bring all your ICAP questions and we will go over those. Thank you. Did you wanted to go over any ICAP questions right now, or?
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay. I don't think you want to get into that now, do you? Save those questions next week.
There was a question, Joni, that was sent to myself privately, and it is asking if the ICAP training will be recorded and will it be posted as well.
I'm not sure that we will record the first session. We may record the second session, or I'm not sure. We are looking at doing some recordings just on certain ICAP aspects. So most likely no, but we can consider that. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Joni. All right, well, that was just a great way to get started. ICAP everything. Now we have delightful Heather, who is joining us to give us some updates and information on Olmsted. So go ahead, Heather.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Heather Lashinsky. I'm the Olmsted Administrator in the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And I'm here just to give an overview of what is Olmsted and what is the Olmsted plan here in Nebraska. So there's been a lot of work over the past couple of years to develop and write an Olmsted plan, and now we're implementing our plan, and it would be a good idea for everyone to be aware of what is Olmsted. So that's my first, let's see. Did you make me a presenter? Yep, I see it, sorry. How's that? Oh, yes, thank you. So the first question is, if you don't know, what is Olmsted? So Olmsted, it refers to a ruling by the Supreme Court back in 1999 that specifically said that it is a violation of Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act to allow the unjustified institutional segregation of individuals with disabilities. And specifically, the court concluded that people with disabilities have a qualified right to receive state-funded supports and services in the community rather than institutions when it is determined community-based placement is appropriate, the person or their guardian does not object to community-based placement, and the placement can be reasonably accommodated. So the ruling held that public entities, which is the state of Nebraska, including the Department of Health and Human Services, including the Division of Developmental Disabilities, should develop a comprehensive, effective working plan for placing qualified individuals with disabilities in the least restrictive settings. The ruling went on to say that the plan must contain concrete and reliable commitments to expand integrated opportunities. Like I said in my intro, Nebraska does have an Olmstead plan. It was developed and written in 2019. It is posted to the DHHS website, and you can get to it through the Division of Developmental Disabilities page. There is a dedicated Olmstead page where the plan is located. So the vision of Olmstead in Nebraska is people with disabilities are living, learning, working, and enjoying life in the most integrated settings. And I just want to add, in 2019, there was legislation that required the CEO of DHHS to create a group, which we call the steering group of various state agencies, including the Department of Education, Department of Corrections, Department of Labor, Department of Transportation. So all of the divisions of DHHS and then various state agencies were, through the legislation, required to come together to develop the plan. And then also the legislation required that the CEO of DHHS bring together what we're calling an advisory group, which is a very large group of advocacy organizations, provider associations, disability advocates, and then people with disabilities or their family members. So the plan was written, and the advisory group and the steering group developed this vision, which again is people with disabilities are living, learning, working, and enjoying life in the most integrated setting. Probably not after, while we were creating the vision, it was also very important to our stakeholders that we adhered to a set of core values in our Olmstead plan. So the Olmstead plan does spell out that Nebraska is committed to person and family-centered approaches. Nebraska is committed to ensuring the safety of and an improved quality of life for people with disabilities. Nebraska is also committed to ensuring that services are readily available at locations accessible to individuals in their need with their needs and their families, excuse me. And finally, the last core value is that Nebraska is committed to supporting individuals to live a meaningful life in the community they choose. So the Nebraska plan reflects these fundamental beliefs in supporting individuals with disabilities. In addition to core values, we also have a set of guiding principles that I will review because the stakeholders, it was very important to our stakeholders that we also adhere to these guiding principles when writing the plan and then when implementing the plan. So the first guiding principle is self-determination and choice. And specifically, the plan says that individuals with disabilities and their families will be supported in controlling decisions about their lives, selecting from an array of service supports and providers. The next guiding principle is that is around independence and least restricted. So individuals with disabilities will receive services that maximize their full potential in the least coercive manner and in the most natural settings possible to meet their needs. The next guiding principle is the use of respectful language, including people first language. So it's important that the Olmstead plan is written in people first language, and that guiding principle is around individuals with disabilities and their families being treated with dignity and as individuals who have their own unique strengths, wishes, and desires. It was also important that our guiding principles use evidence-based strategies. So individuals with disabilities and their families will have access to services and supports that adhere to evidence-based practices in order to achieve the best outcome. It was also important to our stakeholders that our Olmsted plan ensured or had the guiding principle that we were providing services across the lifespan. So Nebraskans with disabilities will have access to age-appropriate services and supports from birth to end of life. Another guiding principle, which is part of the ruling from the Supreme Court, is ensuring safety. So Nebraskans with disabilities will receive services in settings that are free from abuse, neglect, and that meet ADA compliant standards for health and well-being. So that's a pretty important one, because our participants with disabilities, especially those on our waiver program, are particularly vulnerable to abuse, neglect, and exploitation. So it really is important, and it's an integral part of the Olmsted plan to ensure that our services being provided and the settings that people with disabilities live in ensure their safety. Diversity is another guiding principle. Services will honor the geographical differences, race, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic, and gender identities of all individuals with disabilities. Inclusion is another guiding principle. All individuals with any type of disability will have the opportunity to live as neighbors in and to participate as active members of their communities. And the last one is accountability. The systems and services that support individuals with disabilities will be accountable to Nebraska's state administration, legislature, tax-paying citizens, and most importantly, to those we serve. I know that was a lot of information, but the guiding principles are a foundation of our Olmsted plan, but they are the foundations of Olmsted in Nebraska and the foundation of the Americans with Disability Acts. So the actual Olmsted plan that we have in Nebraska does include 7 goals, and within each of those goals, across all 7 of those goals, there are 94 strategies that have been identified that we're in the process of implementing, or we have already implemented, or will be identifying if we still have the ability to implement, because we did have, that little thing called COVID last year that created a worldwide pandemic. So there are some of the strategies originally identified in 2019 that haven't been able to be implemented and may not be able to be implemented because of the resources necessary for COVID, or just the way we have changed the way we do business in some aspects. So the first goal in our Olmsted plan is that Nebraskans with disabilities will have access to individualized community-based services and supports that meet their needs and preferences. And like I said before, all of the goals have outcomes that we want to achieve to be able to show that we've met the goal. And then some of those outcomes also have performance measures that we're measuring against to ensure we're meeting that outcome, and then the strategies of how we're going to meet those outcomes, which will ultimately help us meet the goals. Goal number 2 is around a little bit more around settings. So goal number 2 is all about housing. Nebraskans with disabilities will have access to safe, decent, affordable, accessible housing in the communities in which they choose to live. The next goal is goal number 3, is actually broken out into 2 subcategories. So three subcategories, excuse me. So goal number 3 is Nebraskans with disabilities will receive services in the settings most appropriate to meet their needs and preferences. And so we have three subcategories. We have strategies to divert admissions to and facilitate transitions from institutional care, strategies to divert admissions to segregated settings, and then finally a subcategory of strategies to reduce justice involvement and homelessness. Goal number 4 is around education and employment. Nebraskans with disabilities will have increased access to education and choice in competitive integrated employment opportunities. So that's broken out into the subcategories of integrated education and competitive integrated employment. Goal number 5 is around transportation. Nebraskans with disabilities will have access to affordable and accessible transportation statewide. Goal number 6 is around data and quality improvement. So individuals with disabilities will receive services and supports that reflect data-driven decision-making, improvements in the quality of services, and enhance accountability across systems. So I hope that you're seeing how all of these goals intertwine with those guiding principles. So we have a guiding principle around evidence-based strategies. So it's logical that we would need a goal around using data and data-driven decision-making when evaluating our quality of services and ensuring that the evidence-based services are meeting fidelity to that evidence-based. I apologize, my moving of the PowerPoint is slow. I keep losing my mouse. There we go, sorry. The last goal is around the workforce. So Nebraskans with disabilities will receive services and supports from a high quality workforce. So those are the 7 goals in our Olmsted plan. But it's important to remember that Olmsted is more than a plan. Olmsted is the way that we should be administering our services. It's the way that we should be doing business within a health and human services agency across the state agencies. So anyone that it interacts with, works with, or supports people with disabilities, Olmsted is the way in which we should be providing that support and interacting with the participants that we support and work with every day. So it is more of a plan. It's more than a plan, excuse me. It affirms the principles of equality and inclusion for people with disabilities. Olmsted ensures the basic human and civil rights and health and well-being for people with disabilities. It provides meaningful opportunities for individuals with a disability to live in the least restrictive, most integrated setting of their choosing. And it is our responsibility as the Division of Developmental Disabilities to ensure all of these principles for the people that we are supporting, because we are a publicly funded entity. Medicaid is the payer source for the waiver services that we provide. So it is incumbent on us all to ensure that we are delivering care according to Olmsted. So again, Olmsted reminds us that people with disabilities have the right to be free of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and preventing abuse and neglect from happening in the first place. So Olmsted reminds us that that is everybody's responsibility, is all of our responsibilities. Our providers, services, coordinators, our entire system, that is our responsibility. Olmsted requires us to address the barriers to housing, integrated education, competitive and integrated employment, and services and supports for independent living that people with disabilities face using data-driven decision-making. So Olmsted is more than a plan. It's the way we need to do business, but we also have a lot of work to be able to implement our strategies to be able to get there. the slide. Jill, do you want to take this presentation? Okay. I said stay. It wasn't moving for me. So thank you, everyone. Again, my name's Heather Lashinsky. And we do have an email address if you have any questions. It's on our website. It's on the Olmsted page. It's also dhhs.ne spelled out at nebraska.gov. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Heather. Does anybody have any questions for Heather? All right, we now have Shauna Adams.
Good afternoon, I'm Shauna Adams. I have taken over for Katie Widener as the Stakeholder Engagement Manager. I just have a few slides today about provider bulletins. So we did recently have a new provider bulletin 21-01. Excuse me, that was about the documentation of the participant COVID-19 vaccine. It outlined requirements for the documentation of the participant COVID-19 vaccination in TheraP. And we did have a few changes to the provider bulletins that were on our website. A few of them have been repealed. And then any of the provider bulletins that contain guidance that was put into the policy manual are also being repealed. We're in the process of going through those right now. And then providers must follow the policy manual. So the following have been repealed: the Service Provider Agency Directory, which was 1602. 1603 was non-specialized billing process. 1707 was requirements for independent providers of DD waiver services. 1712 was requirements for TheraP documentation for the MAR and billing and attendance. In 1803 was TheraP attendance and billing for independent providers. And then the provider bulletins which need changes due to EVV will also be updated. I think that's all I got. Pretty short and sweet. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shauna. All right, Micah Miller, you are up.
Hello, thanks, Jillian. My name is Micah Miller. I'm the Data Management and Operational Reporting Administrator for the division. And I'm here to just do a brief overview of EVV customer support and then open up for some questions or concerns from there. And then you will be done having to listen to me talk. So on this slide, I wanted to provide some context or a visualization for how the various systems within EVV integrate with one another. And so this image that you're seeing here is a breakdown of the life cycle of an EVV visit, from the individual budgeting component that the service coordinator takes care of, to issuing service authorizations, down to the provider accounts. And so from the provider service authorizations going into scheduling and EVV visit captures, and then the actual file exchange from TheraP to TELUS, and how that makes its way to DHHS for claims and payment. And an additional component to kind of having a visual representation of the flow in this process, I also wanted to highlight the customer support that comes along with each of these components. And so when you're having issues with EVV visits, thinking about where in this process the problem is occurring. And so if things are occurring up until the point of visits in TELUS, the primary contact would be TheraP. Now, DHHS contacts are always available for support if you're not quite sure where to go. But if you're looking in TELUS and you're not seeing a visit that should be there that's been sent from your end in TheraP, the point of contact there would be TheraP. There is a Nebraska-specific email for TheraP issues, as well as a handy feature within the application of the application itself with My Issues in the top right corner of your dashboard. And so you can report issues there and track the life cycle of those issues and tickets, and have direct communication with the technical support staff at TheraP that can then help work through the issue. And so I just wanted to highlight that point of, if you're not seeing visits in TELUS that should be there, to start with TheraP so that we can cross all the T's and dot all the I's, make sure that everything is working smoothly in TheraP. And then TheraP, DHHS, and TELUS will collaborate and communicate with the escalation of those issues on behalf of the providers. The second component of EVV that I wanted to talk today was fiscal reporting as it applies to claims. And so we are planning enhancements to assist and aid providers in these fiscal reporting activities that need to be done. And so that is underway. I do want to highlight two components specifically that will help you in the interim. One is the 835 remittance, which prior to EVV, you may or may not be familiar with. This is the payment advice or the basic receipt of a claim payment that was available electronically within TheraP on the billing tab under 835 remittance. And so that continues after EVV implementation. And so I wanted to highlight that that reporting in those files can be exported in a comma-separated value file that's workable with Excel, a PDF, or if you're really nerdy, you can export it in the XML structure that the file is sent in. If you like looking at gibberish, you can go with that route if you so choose. But that remains available. One of the components that I want to highlight of the 835 is a difference in the claim identifier, and an easy way for you to identify an EVV service versus a non-EVV service billing claim is that a non-EVV service billing claim the identifier will start with a P, and for an EVV service claim, the identifier will start with a T. Now, if you want to go the other route and look at the specific service codes and dates, you sure are welcome to, but I thought that might be helpful in understanding which is which. And that will include dates of service, participant information, and each 835 will be associated with a single payment or warrant that is transferred to your bank account. So if you're doing fiscal reconciliation between claims and your financial reporting system or your banking accounts, that warrant number will come in handy for that. There is a claims report that is also available in TELUS. Again, we are working at enhancing that report so it is more usable to you as the provider end user, as well as there is an additional report in TheraP that is sent to TELUS in your report library, and that will show you the status of each of the visits that you've sent over, whether it was sent, whether it was rejected, whether it was accepted, to help triage and navigate any issues that you might be encountering. So now that I've covered those 2 points on EVV, I'll open it up for questions or concerns, and we'll go from there. You guys are being way too kind to me. Honestly, I was planning my Leslie Knope game face, and so if there are none, I'll go ahead and hand back over to Jillian, and we'll move on.
Folks are extra quiet today. I mean, I do see many faces, so it's great. Thank you. Otherwise, I would wonder if we're just talking to ourselves because everyone is really quiet, which is all right. Okay, I think up next we have an FBA discussion with Nancy Lamb. She had recently done a presentation for some of our service coordination team members, and we thought it would be really helpful to also give some additional information to providers as well. So I think, Nancy, if you're on, you're welcome to go ahead and get started.
Oh, it's a good thing you didn't hear me. Sorry about that. I am Nancy Lamb. I'm a board certified behavior analyst and the clinical supervisor within the clinical support team of DDD. And so we're going to look at when you need to have an FBA with mental illness or mental health diagnoses and behaviors with or without behaviors. So let's see if I can get it to move. Which way am I supposed to move this thing? Okay. Maybe that's, aha, figured it out. Okay, so behavior, what is a behavior? It's everything we do. It includes how we move, what we say, what we think, what we feel. Behavior, we learn behavior through our life experiences, through the reinforcement that we receive for the different behaviors that we engage in, and possibly some punishment for behaviors, so that makes us less likely to use that behavior again in the future. So, you learn how that flicking a light switch turns the light on. So you've been reinforced for doing that. You go into a room, you look for the light switch right away because you know you'll then have light. Some of the things that may be more punishing would be you're driving down the road at a high rate of speed and you see a police car and you get pulled over. If you get a ticket and it's sizable enough, that may mean that in the future you are not going to engage in speeding behaviors. So behaviors are more than just those things that we categorize as target behaviors, such as hitting and kicking and swearing. There are also the positive behaviors that we do to keep ourselves healthy, to keep ourselves entertained, such as, walking, smiling, brushing your teeth, getting dressed, reading a book, working on an art project. But those things that are not a behavior are those things that a dead man can do. And we actually have a test in the ABA world, or applied behavior analysis world, where it's called a dead man test. If a dead man can do it, then it isn't a behavior. So can a dead man just sit in a chair? Yes. Can a dead man refrain from engaging in target behaviors? Sure can. They're very good at that. So we need to look at the behaviors and the way we're writing some of our goals and objectives regarding behavior to make sure that we're not looking at it as a refrain from, because a dead man is very good at not bathing, at not taking their medication, not moving, not grabbing somebody. So refraining from whining and being knocked over by the wind, some of the examples. So that is all something that we need to consider. We need to have a good operational definition of the behavior. So with mental health diagnoses and associated behaviors, you can have be of an organic origin, such as depression or schizophrenia, bipolar, schizoaffective diseases. Those are chemical imbalances within the brain chemistry. So those are things, that would probably be treated with medication for somebody who has one of those diagnoses. There's also mental health diagnoses that can be a part of somebody's life experience because they have somehow been the victim of some sort of trauma that can lead to them having borderline personality disorder and PTSD. So those are some things you need to look at for mental health disorders. Just because somebody has had a traumatic experience, though, does not mean that they are going to develop borderline personality disorders or have post-traumatic stress disorder. There's all different kinds of trauma. What one person may see as a trauma, for another person, isn't necessarily a trauma. So with problem behaviors are also learned behaviors, like we had talked about, speeding, physical aggression, property destruction, self-injurious behavior. People engage in those behaviors because it gets them something that they want, or it gets some need met. And they have learned through their life experiences that if I hit somebody, that means I'm going to get what I want. That means this person is going to leave me alone. They're going to back off and leave me alone, or they're going to come and say, oh, do you need some help? What's the matter? Why are you hitting somebody? So they get some need met through their target behaviors. So people with mental illness or mental health diagnoses have often learned these same types of maladaptive behaviors as a coping skill or a living skill. So somebody with a mental health diagnosis could learn that when I hit somebody, they leave me alone. So then that becomes a more go-to response during their mental health crises or ongoing behaviors. The target behaviors, they impact the person's ability to live a full life. It affects their ability to maintain relationships, have a stable home, keep their jobs, and have access to the world. And the maladaptive skills can lead to safety issues for both the person and others. So in Provider Bulletin 1717, it says that if the prescribed psychotropic medication is treating a mental health diagnosis with no related behavioral concerns, a BSP and FBA may not be required, but they may be completed at the discretion of the team. So if at any time behavioral concerns are identified, an FBA and BSP would be required. So let's look at this a little bit more in depth. So here you have the good old Venn diagram where you have the problem behaviors or target behaviors of concern on the right in the kind of greenish circle. Those would need an FBA. So if you have somebody in the gray circle to the left with a mental health diagnosis and associated behaviors, they may not need an FBA. So if they have a mental health diagnosis, they have no target behaviors that would preclude them from maintaining a job, which is kind of difficult to say because many people with mental health do have difficulty maintaining a job. But if they don't have any target behaviors such as physical aggression, property destruction, it purely is a mental health diagnosis for which they receive medication, they would not need an FBA. But where the two circles intersect, where the mental health diagnoses and behavior problems intersect, then an FBA would be needed. So somebody has mental health diagnoses and does engage in property destruction or physical aggression, they would need an FBA. If somebody has a mental health diagnosis with no associated target behaviors, they would not need an FBA. I mean, it can be kind of difficult to determine some of the things that we see people requesting an FBA for are more symptoms of somebody's mental health diagnosis, such as hallucinations or agitation. Those are not behaviors that would be included in an FBA. Those are things that they would receive medication, most likely, for those symptoms of their mental health. So here we have some examples. I just saw a little bit of that. Okay, we've got a chat question here. So would it be true for all physical aggression, open hand versus punching someone? Physical aggression, yes. We don't necessarily differentiate physical aggression based on topography. You know, if it's severe enough, if it's intense enough, if it is causing injury, then yes, that would be considered a target behavior. But the difference between slapping somebody and punching somebody, it would all be considered physical aggression. So thank you for the question. We have some examples. So we have Anne. She's diagnosed with schizophrenia and mild intellectual disability. Medication is prescribed for her mental illness. She has hallucinations to which she will respond verbally. So she's talking to somebody the rest of us can't see. Anne will, on occasion, approximately once every 4 months, tap her head with her fist when she's responding to hallucinations. But the taps are not severe or of long duration. So is an FBA needed? I don't know if somebody wants to take a guess and put it in the chat. We can go that way. And not seeing anybody wanting to do that, I'll just go on ahead and give you the answer. So no, an FBA would not be needed. If the severity of the behaviors are not such that it would require an FBA. Her prescription her medications is prescribed for her mental illness and not for any other target behaviors. Could an FBA be completed if the ISP team desires? Well, if the provider has enough money that they want to put into having an FBA completed for this person, they could, but it probably would not be a good use of their funds. And if they were to have an FBA, what behaviors would they be focusing on? A light tap of the head that occurs once every 4 months. You have very little data there to accumulate and to really support the need for an FBA. So in the chat, we have had SCs tell us that an FBA BSP is not required to be completed by a licensed professional when a new problem behavior are observed or when current problem behaviors are intensifying. So clarification on this. If there is a new target behavior that's emerging, I would certainly give it a few months to see if it's not just in response to an immediate environmental issue or possibly a health issue. Right now with allergies flaring up for a lot of people, that a behavior that somebody is engaging in due to the setting event of an illness, it might disappear once whatever they are responding to and their allergies disappears. So you would need to start collecting data on that to see if that target behavior does continue on. And then when current problem behaviors are intensifying. If problem behaviors are intensifying, hopefully you already have data collection going on so that you can show that the data is showing the target behavior is starting to be more frequent. The severity is more intense, which would probably come through in GERs or possibly T-logs. But if you ever have questions about this for a particular person, you could certainly give me a call or somebody else in the clinical support team, and we could look more specifically at the person, ask you more specific questions about the participant that you're working with to provide some more specific suggestions for that participant. Is the provider required to develop a strategy for new problem behaviors? I would think that once you, that's kind of difficult to say necessarily without knowing more about the problem behaviors and the severity of them. It's always good to have a plan and something to direct staff in how to respond to problem behaviors so that they're not reinforcing it, but that's where the FBA comes in, so that you know what the function of the target behavior is so that you can avoid reinforcing it. And my phone number will be on the last slide of this presentation. So we'll go on to the next example. Okay, so Barbara has a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, depression, and mild ID. Her medications are prescribed to decrease aggression. She engages in physical aggression, property destruction, and SIB at least weekly, and at times these behaviors are intense, causing injury to Barbara and staff. Some injury lead to trips to the ER to treat her injuries. So is an FBA needed? Yes, for sure. Definitely. They do need an FBA for this. Could an FBA completed if the ISP team desires? Well, hopefully the team will desire to have an FBA completed so that we can find the function of the target behaviors. What reinforcement is she getting for those target behaviors so that we can stop the reinforcement And what behaviors would they focus on? The aggression, the physical aggression, the property destruction, and the SIB would all be part of it. So yes, people are responding and getting the answers right. Good for you. The next example, Carl, he has a diagnosis of autism, obsessive compulsive disorders, and moderate ID. He receives medication to treat ASD and OCD. He will repeat the same phrase over and over again. He has no other interfering behaviors, but staff get quite tired of hearing him repeat the same phrase over and over. So would an FBA be required? I'm seeing a lot of no's. That's what I would say also, that no, you know, repeating phrases over and over again, sure, it can be kind of bothersome, but it is not something that is necessary to have an FBA. Could they complete the FBA if the team desires? I suppose they could, but I don't know if it's part of the OCD and he's obsessing, saying something over and over again as part of his OCD. The likelihood that you're going to have a lot of success is probably pretty low. And if you're really trying to get him to stop obsessing or saying things repeatedly, you may actually increase it. So that's something that you would need to look at and consider. So there really isn't a behavior here to be a focus of an FBA. So Deborah has diagnosis of bipolar depression, borderline ID. She's received medication for both of her mental health diagnoses. She recently engaged in suicidal statements, which resulted in hospitalization. So is an FBA required? We've got it going both ways. Some would say no, some would say they want one. Some said that maybe the team would need some outside professional guidance. Some say yes, maybe if it continues. So yeah, this is something where, you know, how often is she making suicidal statements? Does she have a plan? Does she have a way to follow through on her suicidal statements? If so, if these are the kinds of things that she has thought through, then it probably is more of a symptom of her depression or her bipolar disorder. If she is somebody who says, I'm going to kill myself just because she's been denied something, you know, she didn't get to watch the movie, that would probably be more of a behavior rather than a symptom of her mental illness. So I think that you would actually need more information regarding this person to know whether the suicidal statements are just kind of a go-to response to a denial of a task or attention versus somebody who is actually in the depth of their mental health right now and is actually thinking that their life no longer has value. Surveyors state that any tracked incidents or behaviors you will need an FBA completed. With that said, in example C, we just shouldn't track repeated statements. I don't know that you would want to track that. I think in example D, where there are suicidal statements, you would possibly want to track that just as a monitoring of her mental health status, unless you think it is more of a behavioral thing, where you would want to, you know, how many times does she make suicidal statements? And also, if it is a behavior, most likely suicidal statements would also be accompanied by some other behaviors, such as physical aggression, possibly. I can't say for sure, but since this is an imaginary person, we can make up whatever story we want. But yes, due to hospitalizations, would that be enough data collected to get an FBA done? No, I don't think necessarily that it would, especially if it is the suicidal statements are and the self-injury possibly would be enough if it's more driven by the mental health status rather than target behaviors. If they're target behaviors, then you may have enough information there about the severity of the target behaviors and the injuries. As you can see, there is not a clear-cut answer to any of these behaviors versus and mental illness kinds of questions. It all depends on the actual person looking at them as far as how they respond to their environment, their interactions with others, their skills and abilities, when the target behaviors occur, what occurs around them, what the antecedent was, and the consequences that go with the behavior. Oh, so no, I'm sorry. You do not have my phone number, but I will give it to you right now. If any of you are interested in calling me, my phone number is 402-806-0907. And my email address is nancy.lamb, as in the animal, at nebraska.gov. Thanks for listening, guys, and thanks for responding in the chat. I appreciate that. Oh, there's another one. This seems contradictory to the regulations. Is the team really capable of making a correct determination when we do not have the required credentials? Sometimes that may be a good question, and you may want to reach out to someone else who can help you with those making those decisions for the individual. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nancy. We appreciate your time today and sharing this information with us. Okay, we have Marty Mead next.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, I'm Marty Mead. I'm the HCBS waiver manager, and I just have a couple of quick comments. We ended on April 2nd the HCBS DD waiver public comment, which started on March 3rd. Currently, we're in the process of summarizing, making changes to those draft waivers, but you can find all of that, the slides from the public comment on the DDD public comment page. As soon as we get those comments and edits made to that, we will post those responses on the, again, public comment page for that. We plan to submit these, the amendments and the additions to CMS no later than June 1st for an implementation date on these amendments on September 1st of this year. And that's any questions, comments? That's all I have.
Thank you, Marty. All right, I think we have some information being shared with us with Katie and Elton. I think Katie had to leave this afternoon, so I think Elton will be presenting.
Yes. Good afternoon. So as Jillian indicated, I'll share some information with you here, also share some updates from Katie. So over the next few slides here, we're going to share information about the results of the quality team's review of the GERs for the quarter. Also, I'll share information regarding the results of our review of the provider quarterly reports, and then also the GER resolutions. So as I'm going through this information, you know, sometimes you're going to see a few graphs and sometimes you'll see some tables, you know, so sometimes it's kind of easy to get wrapped up in just the data that is displayed. Kind of overall, the reason why we're doing this and the reason why it's important to you and to us is, number one, we all kind of share the same mission. So we all want to make sure that the individuals are safe, make sure that their welfare is taken care of, and making sure that the individuals are able to proceed throughout their day. So that's one of the most important things. Also, of other importance is just to let you know that the hard work that you guys do, so we know that your teams do a lot of as far as entering the GERs, completing your provider report, doing that information. So we want to make sure that you know that we are reviewing that information and we want to be able to provide feedback to you. And hopefully the feedback that we provide to you will kind of assist you as you move forward in completing your reports and assist you as you move forward in completing the different general event reports. So that's a second reason. And then a third reason is the data that I'm going to share with you. We end up sharing that information to CMS. So we provide that information on an annual basis in our performance measures, and we also provide it in a every 3 years in a separate report to CMS. So those are some of the reasons why it's important as we go over the information and share kind of the highlights and the graphs and some of the charts and everything. So with that, I will try to move the slides. Let's see, hold on. Okay. So this first slide here, so the quality team, we complete a review of the GER resolutions. So as you guys know, based on our GER guide, a GER resolution is required anytime a high notification GER is completed. So that's been into effect since September, once our policy team, through the work of Sarah Hendricks and others, implemented the GER guide and also implemented the incident and follow-up guide. So as a review, we did a review over the quarter. And one of the things that we're reviewing is, did the GER resolutions get completed, and are they getting completed on a routine basis? So this is just a snapshot in time as far as what we found on our initial review of the completion of the GER resolutions by the providers. So over the October, November, December reporting period, there were 2,253 high notification GERs submitted into the system. So within those GERs, as you guys know, there are separate events. So one GER may have 2 or 3 different multiple events, but there were over 2,000 single high notification GERs completed for the reporting period. So within that reporting period, you see that there was 1,898 resolutions completed for those GERs. So based on that, our performance for that reporting period is that 84% of the required GER resolutions were initiated. So that number should be 100%, because again, based on our guide, it is something required anytime a high notification GER is completed. So the reminders there are providers must complete the required GER within 14 calendar days of submitting that GER. And it needs to be completed as listed in the GER manual. Another part of that is that what's very important is that the providers need to notify the service coordinator of follow-up on completion of via SCOM. So one of the things, again, is just a reminder that it needs to be completed timely for every high notification GER. And also, as completing that, it's important that you notify the service coordinator so that your service coordinator is aware of your follow-up and completion of your follow-up. So both are important. And as I shared earlier, we all share the same goal of making sure the participants are safe. So it's important that you notify the service coordination team so that that service coordinator can again follow up to make sure that the participant is safe. They can also follow up with you to see if you need some additional support or some additional guidance, and also just a time for collaboration between you as the provider on the participants we have and us as the division. So those are the results of for this quarter. So in the future, we are planning on reviewing the GER resolutions in addition to actually just reviewing if they are there and just some of the initial quality aspects. We're going to delve in a little bit deeper actually to what are some of the actions that are being implemented, how are some of the issues identified by the provider, are they being completed timely, are they actually something that's going to help reduce the likelihood of incidents in the future. So we will be starting that review up here soon and providing that information with you here also. So let's see, we'll move on to the next slide, and at the end, if you have any questions, feel free to ask those. So next, the following slides will display results of our quality reviews of the provider quarterly reports. So the provider quarterly reports are required through our regulations and also through our policy for all agency providers to complete these on a quarterly basis. So right now, several of you we know are actually in the process of completing your report. Um, so along with that, you are going to see a provider report card. So it listed, again, I've shared information with each provider as far as what your actual number is. So only you as the provider only you are aware of what your rate is listed here. Everyone else will just see the provider listed. So for the notification GERs, we are reviewing those and assessing whether or not they met our waiver standards. For the provider quarterly reports, we are reviewing those, and we are reviewing those for were they completed timely? Did the information actually provide an overview and an analysis of the incidents? And did actions get taken in response to those? So as we go over those, the most frequent areas of concern is the actually the submittal of the high notification GERs and the notification to the service coordination team. So I'll explain a little bit more once I go over to the next slide. And then we'll also review the overall incident numbers for December. So I think looks like there's something in the GER resolution guide. It's not very clear if a high-level GER, is it always critical, and is an investigation always needed? It seems that it is not abuse or neglect, and investigation would not likely be needed. So I missed the first part of the question there, but overall it looks like the question is for every GER, every high notification GER, is an actual investigation completed? So the answer again is yes. So based on the review and the development of this policy by our policy team, by Sarah Henricks and other people, one of the important things is that our regulations actually require for investigations to be completed for every critical incident. So for us, those are our high notification incidents. The second part of the answer, though, is that while an investigation is needed for every high notification GER, the depth of that investigation varies. So I think, as you were pointing out in your note there, that there are some GERs where a person falls, the person may experience an injury, and you are able to make follow-up and take care of that, respond to it pretty efficiently. So for that type of event, an investigation is needed. However, the depth of it, because it's something that you as a provider can remedy pretty easily for that participant, the depth of that does not need to be that intense, as opposed to if there is a abuse neglect allegation, that an investigation again is required. However, the depth and scope of that is going to be a lot more involved because of the possible abuse and neglect. So again, overall, yes, a investigation is required, and yes, it needs to be in the GR resolution for both of those. So it would need to be in the GR resolution. Okay. Let's see. I missed that last comment that came in. If there is something else, feel free to resend it. Let's move on to the next slides here. So incident management reminders and recommendations. So we'll kind of cover overall what some of the issues were within the individual report and the individual GERs. Overall, just some reminders as we partner together to help keep the participants safe, to help make sure that we are replying to our CMS surveyors with the data and everything that we provide. So some of the important reminders are, first one there, for every high notification GER, you as the provider need to make sure that the service coordinator is notified immediately. So over the next few slides, the GERs for our performance measures that didn't make the criteria, most of those included where the service coordination team was not notified of the event immediately. So one of the major and most important things with that, again, is that once if the division and the service coordinator is not notified of those events, of those critical events, then the division or the service coordinator is unable to provide additional supports to you. They're unable to determine if there are additional measures that need to be taken to help keep the participants safe. And we are unable to implement some of the other processes and some of the other procedures within our internal and both internal and external reporting processes. So it's very important that for any high notification event that you, as the provider, ensure that the service coordination is contacted immediately. If that doesn't occur within that GER, as we just shared in the GER resolution, it's going to be important that you follow up to make sure that you document what action was taken to ensure that that report is going to be notified to the service coordinator in the future. So very important, again, to make sure that the service coordinator is notified immediately for all high notification events. Another reminder is to make sure that the GER is submitted into the THERAP system within 24 hours of service coordination notification. So one of the most important thing, well, it's all important, but again, after most importantly notifying that service coordination so that safety and everything can be maintained, it's also important that GER is actually entered into the system within 24 hours of the service coordinator notification. And that requires that we get it in and we are complying with our federal regs and also complying with our waiver standards. The next part is to ensure that high notification GERs are actually approved within 72 hours of submitting that GER. So I'll go on and we'll kind of share some of the results and I'll show you how that kind of figures into our overall reporting. So here is our provider incident report card. So in the left-hand column there, it lists the provider. So those provider numbers have been sent via Outlook to the person listed as the agency contact for the incident reviews. So those are the providers numbers listed in that section there. That next column is, the next two columns are the results of the quality team's review of the GERs and assessing whether or not those GERs actually enabled us to meet the standards that are outlined in our CMS performance measures. So there we do a random sample each quarter. So the random sample there, you see all the different the numbers that are listed there are all randomly sampled. So that second column lists how many GERs actually met our waiver requirements, met our performance measures, how many GERs were in the sample. The next column there is what's the GER rate. So the second to the last column, the provider report performance. So that again lists what how the provider did on the provider quarterly report. So that provider quarterly report, we're assessing, was that report submitted timely? Did they do an analysis? Was a compilation completed? And was action included throughout that report that indicated that any systemic issues were actually followed up on? So here you see for each provider what some of the measures that were there. So same information, the different agency providers that were involved in the GER sample, and also those providers that were listed for completing the assessment of their provider quarterly report. So as you see, whenever in that GER rate column, that means that all the 100% of the components listed in that GER were met as we would complete our reporting to CMS. Here's the next slide. In this column here, the GER rate again would be any time that a measure was completed that did not meet it. So those would be ones where the service coordination staff was not notified immediately so that our system could put things into place to ensure that the individuals were safe. The provider report performance, again, a compilation of were those categories met based on the QI team's review of the provider report. So there are 4 different components that's looked at. So anytime you see something in that second to the last column, that means if 100% means all 4 components were met, something less means that there were certain components that were not met. So within the provider report, the most common area that ends up not being met by the providers is the actual use of the template itself, and then also just documenting what actions were taken. and how those actions are going to result in reduced incidents for the individual. So here you see overall just reasons that the GERs did not comply with our GER guide. So the previous information that I shared with you was how that information actually corresponded with our required CMS performance measures. Now on the quality side, we're just outlining, are there things that we need to do and need to ensure after the performance measure is met, but are there things that we need to do to make sure that our internal system is working, which includes our partnership with U.S. providers. So here you see some of the top reasons that those GERs did not meet our internal guide. So as I shared earlier, where they're not submitted timely, not approved timely, and again, the notifications are not completed. So most importantly for each of those is going to be some communication, collaboration with the service coordinator. So that's that bottom one there, the notifications. And then after that, everything else is kind of built on, was the service coordinator notified immediately? And then from there, was the information entered into the therapy system after the service coordinator was notified? So there was a question, what is the 0% on the report? So a 0 would mean that if it's in the GR area, it would mean that a GR was reviewed and that the GRs within the sample did not actually meet the criteria for meeting our performance measure. So that would be a 0 for the GR section. On the provider report section, it would mean that a provider report was submitted by the provider. Our quality team reviewed that provider report and determined that none of the aspects within that report were completed. So that would be a 0 for the provider report, and then the composite would be the composite of each of those. Let's see, we'll move on to the next area. So again, this is just an overall guide for you. So our quality team and our quality improvement committee, we review incidents on an ongoing basis. So this is just a comparison of our fourth quarter of 20 versus our the fourth quarter of 19. So overall, you can see that there were fewer high notification incidents this year. So for this quarter, and also in comparison to the same time last year. Participants with high notification GER averaged 2 for the quarters. 6% had more than 4 high notification GER events in the quarter. So one of the things that you're aware of is just that in comparison to 2019, in comparison to this year, where we are mainly dealing with the pandemic, there were, of course, fewer incidents listed. One of the things that our quality improvement committee looked at, and one of the challenges that we are going to be kind of exploring over the next few reporting periods, is just for those critical events, can we still decrease those while at the same time making sure that the participants have a full life and making sure that they are still doing things that they desire to do, but at the same time making sure that there is a continued effort on reducing incidents. Let's see, that was it. Any questions at all? If not, I will turn it back over to Jillian.
Hi, this is Sarah Hendricks with the policy team. Before we get off the topic of GERs, the monthly supplemental training information sessions are scheduled for next week for April. So if you have questions about the incident reporting expectations and guides, or would like to hear that training again, or if you haven't had it in the past and you would like to have the training that we offer to providers, those will be going on next week for the month of April.
Thanks, Sarah. Let's see, there was also a question that just came in is, do we actually send reports back to the provider if they didn't meet it? So we don't send the reports back. So we usually, at number one, we try to follow up with those providers in which there is anything systematic between the combination of the review of the GERs and the provider report. So we usually try to follow up. And also, this again will be something that we've started the last two quarters now. Is this is your initial information for you to see that. So you will either have been followed up with kind of what some of the missing issues were. We've had certain providers call and kind of say, what did they miss out on? What things weren't completed? And then also we, the quality team, will be following up with those providers where for sure if there were a 0% on the provider report or the GER. So you'll be followed up with in the future to address those. So I believe that's all I have, Jillian.
Thank you very much, Elton. I appreciate that information and going through it. We got a lot of questions on the GER and the reports that are submitted. So thank you for taking your time to go through it. Brad, if you are on, I believe.
Yes, I am. Thanks, Jillian. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brad Wilson. I'm a program manager in the quality unit, but I am also the Nebraska NCI coordinator. And I was going to present some information to you today for the staff stability survey that's currently being done by usually your finance people or your HR staff as my primary contacts. This is where we stood as of last Friday, that we have 53% of providers haven't opened up the survey link at all. We've had a little over 15% have clicked the site but haven't started. Almost 7% have started, and almost 29% have finished. I've personally sent out reminders and portal links again 3 times since the portal opened in February. I would remind providers that in order for this survey to be valid, we need 95% of providers to complete the survey. In 2020, we did not have that. We had 78% of providers complete the survey. I like to follow up with you about as much as your staff likes to hear me call or email them. So I'm just asking for your support in trying to get this survey completed, hopefully within the next 30 days. Actually, we have till the 30th of June, but I'd sure like to target May, mid-May, late May of getting this done so that we're not in a rush at the end. All of this data is 2020 data, most of it at point in time data of December 31st, 2020. So your staff has all the data you need to complete the survey already available to them. So there's no need to wait. And I'll give you my email address. It's brad.wilson@nebraska.gov. If you have specific questions about where your agency falls within the spectrum there of results, feel free to give me an email and I'll reply back as soon as I can and let you know where you stand. I've had some providers ask. Some providers that have multiple locations have contacted me, and one person has done the survey for multiple locations, and we can do that. So there's a lot of different things we can do, and I just ask for your cooperation so that we do get to 95%, and that's all I have on that one. Now for the not for the GERs, for the National Coordinator in-person survey, I just wanted to let you know that we have more than this done now. I got a recent report from Rachel Ray, the Monroe Meyer survey team leader. We're up to 28% completion. We've got 119 surveys complete as of earlier this week. And I would just like to thank you for your assistance when Rachel or a member of her team contacts you for assistance in setting up or having your staff participate as a proxy to help answer questions. We've had very, very good participation with with providers providing needed supports, also providing locations. You know, most of the surveying is still done remotely at this point, but all the survey team has been vaccinated. And so as you open up your agencies, we, you know, can go back to face-to-face in-person surveys based on your and the guardian's comfort level and the participant's comfort level in completing those. Any questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Brad. All right, I think I get a few minutes to talk with folks. Thank you to everybody else who had presented the information today. We just had a few things that we wanted to talk about from a service coordination standpoint. But before I get into just a couple of topics, I did want to put out a big thank you to all of you and to your staff who have been incredibly supportive in service coordination, getting out and seeing people the last few weeks. It's been over a year since we've seen many of our folks, and in fact, some of our newer teammates who have joined the division during the pandemic have never had the opportunity to meet some of the participants that they get to work with. And so we really appreciate your support and welcoming us back into the community. I know we're not visitors, but I still really appreciate, I know the division really appreciates the partnership that we have with our agency providers. So thank you. All right, I just want to talk a second about provider referrals. So as an agency, if you feel like you can support a participant who is in need of services, we're just asking if you could work with us a little bit and wait to commit to them before you let them know that you're going to be able to provide this support. Wait until you feel really confident that you can do that. What we're finding is a lot of families are sharing with us that they're having conversations with providers. Providers are saying, yep, absolutely, we can provide this support. And so then there starts to have conversation with service coordination. We might even get to the intake meeting, and then it turns out that maybe the provider doesn't have a location yet, if it's a residential placement, or for intermittent services, they don't have staff hired, and they're anticipating it'll take 6 months to get staff hired. Or even in some cases, they're accepting the referral, they're saying they can support the participant with their current funding, and then we get to the intake meeting and there's requests for exception funding. All of that sort of just delays the process. But what we're really hearing from families and from guardians who are anxious to get services going is they're feeling a little bit frustrated that they had kind of received a commitment from agencies, and then they're having to wait a long time, and then they feel really badly about looking at another agency or going somewhere different, and they want to wait and be patient. And of course we want to wait and be patient as well, but we also want to help them find a provider who can provide that service to them right away. Certainly if you think you can support them and you feel like it's going to be a fairly quick turnaround to getting staff, again, we can encourage the families and let them know that sometimes it takes a little time. But like I said, what we're hearing, and we've had a lot of offers lately, which is really great, is some families are being told that it'll take a good 6 months or longer before they get staff hired to support them. I do see a question in here. Give me a second here. Is there a general rule of thumb regarding whether a provider should respond to referral on TheraP via the dialog box within the referral versus sending an email to the SC? I don't know that there's a rule of thumb. There is a comment box on the referrals in TheraP though for questions and dialogue to go back and forth, or you can send an SCOM so that information can be sent secure. I know the part of the issue I hear from service coordination excuse me, is that there isn't an alert, or nothing alerts them when a provider might make a comment on the referral and ask further questions. And so a service coordinator needs to be in a good routine and a good habit to go in there and check that. So there could be a delay at times if the SC isn't aware that you have made a comment. I do think we are looking at our referral module. If you recall, this is one of the first modules that we started in TheraP many, many years ago. And so I think we're looking at, could there be, rather than providers, an accept button? Could there be like, I'm interested, or I want more information button? For us on our side, is there a way to just discontinue all the rest of the referrals rather than going in there individually and do it? So we are looking at seeing if there's a way to make that module a little bit more user-friendly for not just our side, but also for providers as well. Another question, can you request that the SC update the TheraP referrals? Some referrals have been in there for almost a year, and it is hard to know if they're still wanting services. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. We will certainly reach back out. We have most all of our service coordination supervisors and administrators on the call today, so we'll have them go back and remind folks to do that. Again, it becomes something I think tedious, and but we need to be in a better routine and habit to go in there and clear those out. So thank you for letting us know. Any other questions on provider referrals? Okay. Another thing we just wanted to talk a little bit about is Appendix K and the transition and flexibilities. So we know that we've been really encouraging folks to get back out into their community, reintegrate back into their normal, right? And so conversations have already been happening. I think there have been a lot of providers and families who are eager and anxious to get things going and getting things back to normal. I just wanted to know how things were going from your guys' end. Are you seeing bumps in the road? Are you seeing concerns, things that are coming up? Just sort of maybe wanted to open up for a little bit of dialogue. If you're so willing to have dialogue with me. Oh, that's on referrals. Well, hopefully the transition is going well. I think there are still some folks who are reluctant and a little bit nervous to move forward in transitioning back. I think hiring staff, I see a comment in here, is becoming a difficulty as well. And so, you know, whatever you need from us, let us know, but we certainly are anxious to get people back out into the community and back to doing things that we know they've missed over the last year in doing so. Couple comments in here. Oh, hold on. Thanks for the comments. No issues for us. It's moving slower. However, it would be great if we have a continued option for alternative locations. So remember, while Appendix K is still approved, we do have that flexibility for those alternative locations, and although it's still approved today, and that flexibility is there, again, we are encouraging people when they're comfortable and there is the ability to transition back. Transition is going well, but hiring staff for our day program is a huge barrier. And so not having the staff is making it difficult for participants to return. Certainly that would be difficult, right? We still have several not coming back and wanting, and we keep encouraging them. Okay, great. Well, if there's something that, you know, the division can do to help, I'm not sure that we can help with the staffing. Please don't take any of our staff. We appreciate and value all of our staff, but if there is anything else that we can do in that transition, do let us know. Let's see, so on the topic of Appendix K and the flexibilities, one of the things I am hearing from service coordination as we are staffing, getting back out, and is staffing. And so what we are hearing is, you know, service coordination will be out, we'll be doing our observations and monitoring, and maybe there just isn't adequate staff there based on the participants' funding level. We know Appendix K gave us the most flexibilities, right? Especially if the staff in that home were COVID positive or if there's quarantining. But what we are hearing with some feedback we're hearing, which might be a little bit different than what I'm seeing in the chat here, is that those flexibilities are not there just to have less staff. And so if you have adequate staff and that person has exception funding, they're on risk, they're on enhanced funding, that we do need to make sure that we're supporting them with the level of supervision that they need. I think some comments that service coordination was hearing, or it's what's being reported to me, is that, you know, providers are mentioning, well, we have the flexibility because of Appendix K, and we certainly do have that, but we just don't want to we want to start transitioning out of that, right? But it sounds like you guys are still struggling with some staffing issues. So we'll make sure that we reiterate that back to our service coordination team as well. But when you have the staff, and of course, when the participant needs it, that was the other caveat with the Appendix K staffing flexibilities, is that we had to make sure that we were meeting participants' needs. But so if they are having some significant behaviors or having some concerns, we do want to make sure that that level of staffing is there. Before I move back onto the next topic, I think there was a couple comments sent to me privately on referrals. So I'm going to go back really quickly. Okay. When looking to update the referral module, could it be an additional denial response added? Do not provide services in the participants area. Oh, okay. Okay, I think I got all of that in there. Another topic we just wanted to cover was therapy documentation. So I was asked just to remind providers that as you guys update safety plans or protocols or other documentation for participants that you support, if you could please make sure that those get updated into therapy so that service coordination staff have access to the most current document. So that way with the ones that they're attaching to the ISP is current. I think we're seeing some of the older documentation still being attached when there maybe is a newer document, but it hasn't been uploaded for it hasn't been uploaded in the provider account. So the service coordinators can't go in and obtain the most current copy when it comes to those protocols or safety plans. So any extra time you can put into that, that would be great. Again, I know everybody is strapped right now with looking for staff, it sounds like, but we would certainly appreciate that. And then the last thing that I had to talk about was service authorization changes. So as you all know, service coordination is committed to making sure that authorizations are in place prior to service delivery. And of course, when we need to update or change service authorizations. That said, we know that there are times where that doesn't occur, and we really appreciate you reaching out directly to the supervisor or the SC to make sure that those changes are occurring or we get an authorization in place. If the service coordinator or the SC is unavailable or they're not getting back to you, please make sure that you reach out to the SDA so that they can assist you as well. We're really trying to make sure that service coordination is being timely on getting these authorizations changed when requested. One thing that could also help us in that is when you are sending an SCOM or sending communication to the service coordinator to change those authorizations, if you could give us all of the information up front. I believe many times what we're getting in the SCOM is just a statement that says, could you please go in and add more units to Sally's HCI authorization. And so there's not the time frame of when you need that, and there's not what additional units are needed. And so any information that you can provide us up front in that request will help us get that change made more quickly. And so I did attach to the invites for today's meeting. I did attach the most current phone list and staffing list for each district. So if you haven't seen those on the invite, please go ahead and take those and send those and distribute them to staff within your agencies. That will also give you who each who each service coordinator reports to, and it'll give you the service district administrator for that area as well. All of our staff are here to help you when there's issues, concerns, or questions, but we really do value and appreciate when you can give us each the opportunity to address it at our level first. And so, of course, if the SC isn't able to help and if the supervisor can't help or the SDA, I can certainly, I'm happy to help if you could reach out to myself. We just want to make sure that we're doing what we can at all of our levels to make sure that participants' needs are being met and you guys are getting the support you need as well. Does anybody have any questions for me? I think what I'm going to do is take this down so then we can all see each other, so I don't only just have to stare at the two people at the top here. Oops. Okay. All right, well, that's all I had to cover. I think there might be a few other people who have joined us since we began the meeting today. Are there any other topics from our state staff that anybody wants to cover before we open it up to providers if they have additional questions? Crickets. Okay. All right, well, how about providers? Do you guys have any questions for us that we can help answer? Let's see, any update on the DI instructions? Any update on the DI instructions? I think you're asking if there are any, I didn't know we were updating our developmental index instructions. We did recently come up with some tips and guidance for staff and providers when filling it out. And I think that information was sent out to service coordination, and I think either is or will be attached to our standard operating procedure. I believe it can be shared with providers, and so if you want to reach out to your local service coordination office, and that information can be shared with you if that's what you're asking for. Yes.
No, I didn't ask the question, but I know on like the last provider meeting, there was discussion that the ICAP might replace the DI. So I'm not sure if that's what they're asking.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Laura. I do think, I don't know if somebody far more, yes, I think the division is still looking at having the ICAP replace our current level of care, our current DI. Where we're at in that process, I certainly can't speak to that as specifically as maybe somebody else can. But
Want me to take that?
Yeah, please, Curtis, go right ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, so you know, we had been working with some consultants looking at best practices throughout the state in regard to making sure that one, we had a process that was a little more streamlined, and two, that was based on an already established objective assessment, so that we weren't moving away from processes we already had and adding another layer. So right now it's in the assessment phase. Joni and Tracy and myself are looking at the bridge document to bridge the LOC document to the ICAP. There are 7 states that do this as a best practice. And although no determinations have been made, this is kind of a phase 2 rollout, which we're just now picking up. It is absolutely something we're looking at, and it's something that we will be including in as the process, but we are very much at the initial stage of still examining best practices from other states and still looking at the document, because that would actually replace the I think it's the 6-page, I don't know how long the disability index is or the whatever's used, but it's supposed to create an efficiency by using a non-subjective tool to support the level of care, and so that we're using assessment that we're already used to using to substantiate that. And if there's any questions on that, just let me know.
Thank you very much, Curtis. I appreciate you assisting with that. A couple other comments in the chat box. For new intakes, we're having difficulties with some obtaining information required, such as physical, psych evaluations. If service coordination can help us obtain these documents, that would be great. So, yep, we will make sure that we remind service coordination if you are looking for those documents, or if they weren't attached in the initial referral, certainly we can assist you in getting some of those documents. Can SC update tell us so that participants' names only show up once? Well, that's a really good question. I see heads shaking no. I don't know that we can, but I'm not sure. Micah, are you still on with us? Well, shenanigans. So I don't know that we can. I'll work on trying to get you an answer here before we end. Let's see. We are being told that we need doctor's notes for support in walking noted on the DI. We are being told that we need doctor's notes for support in walking on the DI. You know, if you're having some concerns with perhaps the position that you think that the agency, as an agency, you think you should be able to want to proceed one way and service coordination is saying another, I would encourage you to reach out to the local supervisor to have those conversations, and then we can elevate it up from there to get you an answer. Because without knowing the person and without knowing all of the other needs that they have, it would be really difficult to weigh in on that. Several individuals have more than one Medicaid number showing up. I'm guessing that's related to the TELUS answer, which, thank you. I have somebody, this is what I love about our team. Someone asks a question I don't know and I just get pop-ups. It's great. Go team, go. The comment was made to have them reach out to TELUS to update. They should be able to open a ticket and then keep your ticket number. So should you have questions on getting that resolved, you can reference that. Thank you very much. Wonderful support. We're being told the SC is responsible to complete the DI and it is not necessary to send it to them. So this is something, thank you, provider, for bringing this up. This is something that we've been really trying to work on with service coordination. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the service coordinator is responsible that the DI is completed and that the DI, that everybody in the team agrees with how it was completed. So there are, I think, some service coordination staff that feels like it's their form and they are the ones that has to get that completed. Bless their heart for wanting to take ownership and be responsible for that. But it is really also a team document. The person that knows that participant best, the one that is providing the majority of the support, could be the one to complete it. But we have some agencies who don't want to complete it, and the service coordinator will complete it. At the end of the day, it is to be completed by all who knows the person, but the service coordinator is responsible to ensure that it is submitted. So it really should be a team effort. If you are having specific issues with SCs not accepting ours or not agreeing on maybe where, or not accepting yours, excuse me, and not agreeing with maybe what was filled out for the DI, reach out to that SC or reach out to that local supervisor, and they can help support you with that as well. If you need assistance on the DI, then, oh, okay. Thank you. Telus said, oh, Telus is reporting to you that the SC should make the changes. Okay, well, I'll certainly share that with Micah, who, as I know, one of the division staff who has regular conversations with Telus, so we can go ahead and report that to him, and they can, we'll figure out which course of action you need to take there. I think that might be the, oh, there's another one. At times on the DI, none of the options are available to the customer. Oh, wait. I should learn how to read. I apologize. At times on the DI, none of the options are applicable to the customer. We are told that we are to pick one that is closest, but does not accurately document the consumer's needs. We are making a comment, but the SC is requiring a box be checked. Does anybody on our service coordination team or eligibility team who feels a little bit more familiar want to take this one?
I know with our tips and tricks on our side, it just says that if it doesn't apply, to write a comment that indicates the level of skill. So that's the guidance I've given my team, is that if neither applies, so one of the big ones is reading ability and writing. They're very huge gaps between what you can check and what you shouldn't check. And so I think on our most recent tips and tricks, it was just stated to just put a comment. If you can't check either and nothing applies, to make a comment relevant to that skill.
Stacy, I'll chime in on Stacy's comment. This is Angie. The section where I've seen that come up is where it assesses level of assistance with medication administration, and at times the provider doesn't assist with that, so they don't mark anything. The family assists with it. So in that case, then that's an area where there would need to be something marked. Regardless, there has to be some level of guidance with how the person is supported to take their medications.
And Jill, I was just going to support that as well, that there are some where you have to check one, like either tells the truth or makes false statements. I mean, it has to be one or the other. And if it doesn't completely apply, or if there are things like writes name and applications, they might be able to write their name, but not do applications. So just make those notes in the comment section, clarifying that so we know.
Thank you. Thank you, team, for your support in helping answer that. It does sound like maybe we're not super consistent, and I'm seeing a couple of those comments here in the comment box that perhaps service coordination is directing or a little bit differently in those. So we'll make sure that we get that tips and tricks and that guidance back out to our team. And then, you know, hopefully that will help with some of the inconsistencies as well. Any other questions? Okay, well, we certainly appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you again to the presenters. Thank you again, provider staff, for making time. We know your plates are very full. So we are pleased that you were able to join us today. Should you come up with another question, go ahead and reach out to us and let us know, and we'll do our best to help. All right. Thank you, and have a fantastic rest of your day.